The knock came 3 times, soft and unsure, almost lost in the scream of the winter wind. Elias Crow froze where he sat. No one knocked on his door. No one ever came this high into the mountains, especially not in the dead of winter. The storm outside was strong enough to kill a man in minutes, yet someone was there, standing in the dark, asking to be let in. Elias reached for his rifle without thinking. His cabin had been silent for months. Just the crackle of fire and the sound of wind through pine trees. He had chosen this life. No people, no trouble, no past. He moved slowly toward the door, boots quiet on the wooden floor, every sense sharp. Another knock came weaker this time. When Elias pulled the door open, the storm rushed inside like a living thing. Snow flew across the floor. A woman collapsed forward, falling at his feet. Behind her stood 2 children shaking, their faces pale and scared. Blood stained the snow where they had stood moments before. Whatever had driven them up this mountain in winter was not hope. It was fear. Elias did not ask questions. He pulled the boy inside first, then lifted the small girl in one arm and kicked the door shut. The warmth of the fire fought the cold they brought with them, but the fear stayed, thick in the air. The woman tried to stand and failed. Her hands were cracked and bleeding. Her coat was thin and useless against this kind of cold. The boy moved in front of his sister, eyes hard, ready to fight a man twice his size. Elias saw that look. He had worn it himself once. "Sit," Elias said, pointing to the chairs near the fire. The boy did not move. "You're safe," Elias said again, softer. After a moment, the boy nodded and helped his sister into the chair. The girl clutched a small bundle, wrapped in cloth, and did not let go. Elias helped the woman to the other chair and went to the stove. He worked quietly, heating water, adding dried herbs. Shock killed faster than wounds if you let it. They drank slowly. The girl made a face at the bitter taste, and Elias added a spoon of honey. She smiled for half a second before fear took her again. Elias cooked simple food, cornmeal, and dried meat. He let them eat before asking anything. Hunger and cold made truth messy. The woman finally spoke. Her name was Lydia Hale. The children were Noah and Emily. She knew who Elias was. People in the town below talked about the mountain man who lived alone and asked no questions. She had gambled her children's lives on those stories. Elias told them to sleep. He gave them his bed and took the floor near the fire rifle across his knees. Outside, the storm raged like it meant to tear the world apart. Inside, 3 lives breathed because he had opened his door. Morning came gray and slow. The storm did not break. Lydia was already awake, making coffee like she belonged there. Elias did not like that it felt normal. She told him the truth because she had no reason left to lie. Her husband had died. The land was in debt. The man who held the debt wanted more than money. When she refused, she ran. Armed men followed her into the mountains. The storm saved them barely. Elias was the last hope she had. Elias listened without changing his face. He had seen men like the one she described, men who hid behind paper and guns and called it law. He told her she could stay until the storm broke. He did not promise more. Promises were dangerous. The days passed slow and tense. The cabin filled with sounds Elias had forgotten. A child's questions, the scrape of boots, the quiet strength of a woman who refused to fall apart. Noah watched everything, learning, guarding. Emily played with her cloth doll and named it Annabelle. The name stuck in Elias's head longer than it should have. On the 3rd day, the storm eased. Elias saw movement through the trees, 2 riders searching. Lydia went pale. Elias loaded his rifle and waited. When one man came too close, Elias fired into the snow at his feet. The message was clear. They left. But Elias knew they would return. That night, he told Lydia the truth about himself. He had never had a wife, never had children. He had come to this mountain to be alone because alone was quiet, and quiet was safe. Lydia asked him if safe was the same as alive. He had no answer. The next morning, another man arrived, half frozen and lost, a school teacher from town. Helping him meant more danger, but Elias did not turn him away. By then, turning people away felt worse than facing whatever was coming. When Elias saw the armed men return closer this time, he knew hiding would not be enough. Someone had to go for real help. The mountain passes were deadly, but Elias knew them. He packed his gear and told Lydia how to defend the cabin. Noah watched every word. Emily made him promise to come back. Elias stepped into the cold, knowing that when he returned, everything would be different or nothing would be left at all. Elias Crow did not look back after he closed the cabin door. If he looked back, he might see Lydia's face or Noah's steady hands on the rifle, or Emily clutching her doll like it could stop bad men. And if he saw any of that, he might turn around. Turning around would feel right in his chest, but it would be wrong for survival. So he strapped on his snowshoes, pulled his coat tight, and started down the mountain like he was racing death itself. The cold bit through every layer. Snow creaked under him, and the wind pushed at his back like it wanted him to fall. Elias knew these slopes better than any map. He had walked them in blizzards, in moonlight, and in silence so deep it made a man hear his own heart. Today the mountain felt different. Today, every step carried a promise he never should have made. He had promised a little girl he would come back. Promises were easy to speak and hard to keep. As the sun climbed, Elias stayed off the main trail. Men like Roscoe Vint would place watchers where a normal traveler would go. Elias was not normal. He moved through thick timber and narrow ravines where tracks vanished under drifting snow. Still, he stopped often to listen. The mountain was quiet, but human danger had its own sound, the faint clink of tack, a horse snort, a voice carried by wind. Near midday he heard it, voices below. Elias dropped low behind a fallen pine and looked through the branches. 3 riders moved along the buried trail, leading their horses through deep snow. They looked tired and angry, the kind of men who blamed the weather for slowing their cruelty. One of them pointed up the slope in the direction of Elias's cabin. The others nodded as if they were certain the prey was trapped. Elias waited until they passed, then went the other way, taking a longer route that cost time but saved his life. He did not like what he had seen. It meant Vent was not sending just 2 men. He was sending a net, and nets did not stop until they caught something. By nightfall, Elias camped without a fire. Tucked under a rock ledge, he ate cold jerky and drank snowmelt that numbed his teeth. He slept in broken pieces, waking every time the wind shifted. Each time he awoke, he pictured the cabin and the people inside it. He pictured Lydia trying to be calm for her children. He pictured Noah refusing to sit down, staying alert like a soldier, too young to be one. He pictured Emily's small voice asking if the bad men were coming back. Before dawn, he started again. The second day brought him lower, closer to the valley, where the air grew heavier and the snow less deep. Flat Ridge came into view like a cluster of tired buildings crouched beside a frozen creek. Smoke curled from chimneys. People moved through streets, bundled up, trying to pretend winter was normal. Elias had only come to town once a year, always in summer, always fast, always leaving before anyone could talk too long. This time he walked in during winter, dirty, tired, and full of purpose. He went straight to the doctor's office. The sign read, Dr. Harrison Webb. Elias knocked hard enough to shake the door. A voice from inside said they were closed. Elias told them a man was dying of frostbite in the high country. The door opened to a thin man with tired eyes and a careful face. He looked Elias up and down like he was weighing whether this was truth or trouble. When Elias had Walter Kemp's name, the doctor's face changed. Walter was known in Flat Ridge. He had taught half the town's children to read. He had helped farmers write letters and kept track of deaths and births. If he was dying, it mattered to everyone, even the people who pretended it did not. The doctor agreed to come. He packed a bag with medicine, instruments, and bandages. Elias told him not to talk to anyone. The doctor did not ask why. He already knew. In a town like Flat Ridge, everyone knew who held power. They left by the trees instead of the road. Elias moved fast. The doctor kept up, breathing hard, but refusing to complain. They had gone only a couple miles when Elias heard horses. He pulled the doctor down behind a log, just in time. 3 riders passed close enough for Elias to see their faces. Hard eyes, cold smiles, men who did not fear being caught because the law belonged to their boss. The doctor whispered that they were Vince's men. Elias stayed still until they were gone, then pushed onward. The climb back into the mountain was worse than the descent. The doctor was not built for this kind of travel. But he did not quit. He stumbled once, and Elias caught him before he fell into a drift. They made a small fire only once, hidden in a sheltered cut of rock, just long enough to drink hot coffee and stop their hands from stiffening into claws. Elias did not sleep that night. He could not. Every hour felt like stolen time. Every delay felt like a door closing. When they finally reached the cabin, Elias stopped in the trees, scanning for signs of attack. He expected broken windows, smoke from fire, tracks everywhere. He saw none of that. The cabin stood quiet, the chimney breathing thin smoke into the cold air. Still, something was wrong. The door was barred from the outside. Elias's stomach tightened. He ran forward, grabbed the bar, and threw his weight against it. It was wedged deep, meant to hold someone inside. The doctor grabbed the other end, and together they yanked it free. Elias kicked the door open and stepped inside with his rifle raised. The cabin was intact. The fire was burning. Lydia stood by the stove with a revolver in her hand. Noah held the rifle near the window, like he had been taught. Emily sat in the corner with Annabelle pressed to her chest. Walter lay by the hearth, pale but breathing, and tied to one of Elias's chairs was a stranger, his wrists bound and his mouth gagged. Lydia's face broke when she saw Elias. Relief hit her like a wave, and she had to swallow hard to keep herself steady. Noah's eyes stayed hard, but something like trust flickered there. Emily stared at Elias like he was a ghost that had walked back into the world. Elias asked what happened. Noah said the man had come claiming to be lost, begging to be let in. Lydia had recognized him from town. He was one of Vince's men, the kind who smiled when a woman said no. They had not opened the door when he tried to force his way in through the window. Noah held him at gunpoint while Lydia came around with the revolver. Together they trapped him, tied him up, and barred the door from outside to make it look like no one was home. Elias felt something tight in his chest. He had taught a child to fight. A good man should never have to teach that, but a good man had to do it anyway. The doctor wasted no time. He went to Walter, checked his fever, and looked at the blackened toes. His face turned grim. He said the infection was spreading, and Walter would die if they did nothing. Lydia held Walter's hand while the doctor worked. Elias heated water and held cloth. Noah kept Emily turned away, whispering to her about brave dolls and brave girls. Walter screamed once. There was a sound that shook the cabin's walls harder than the storm ever had. Then he passed out. The doctor finished breathing hard, hands steady, and said Walter would live. When the worst was done, the cabin fell into a heavy quiet. Lydia sat with Walter and watched his chest rise and fall. Noah stayed at the window. Emily finally crawled into Lydia's lap and hid her face. Elias turned to the bound man. He pulled the gag off. The man spit and cursed. He said Lydia was a thief. He said Vent owned the debt, and the law was on his side. He said Elias had no right to interfere. Elias did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He told the man he would be lucky if he left the mountain alive. The man laughed and said there were more coming. He said Vin would bring enough guns to burn the cabin down and still have bullets left. That was when the doctor spoke quietly. He said the territorial marshal was due to pass through in a few days. He said the marshal was not from Flat Ridge and did not answer to Vent. He said it was the only chance to turn this into something bigger than a rich man's hunger. Lydia looked at Elias like she was afraid to hope. Hope had hurt her before. Hope had died with her husband. But hope was standing here now in the shape of a mountain man who had crossed a killing path to bring help. Elias said he would go again, this time to find the marshal. He would take the high pass that Vince's men would not expect. Lydia tried to argue. Noah tried to volunteer. Walter, weak and pale, told Elias not to risk his life for an old teacher and a widow. Elias told them the truth. He said he had spent 15 years hiding from the world. He said if he stayed hiding now, he would never forgive himself. He said he had opened his door, and that choice had changed him. He said he would not close that door again. That night, they planned like people who knew bad men were not done with them. They reinforced the door. They moved the table to make cover. They counted bullets. Lydia learned how to load the revolver with steady hands that still trembled. Noah learned how to watch the train without freezing from fear. Emily learned to stay quiet when told, even though her eyes begged to ask questions. Before dawn, Elias prepared to leave again. Lydia stopped him at the door. She did not cry. She looked him straight in the face and asked him to come back alive. Not just for the children, but for her too. Elias wanted to say something soft and kind, but soft words did not come easy to him. He only nodded and told her he would return. Emily brought Annabelle to him like the doll was a guardian. Elias touched the doll's worn cloth head with 2 fingers, like it was a solemn oath. Noah watched from the corner, jaw tight, trying not to show that he was afraid. Elias stepped into the cold and began climbing. The high pass was worse than before. The wind up there was sharp enough to cut skin. Snow hid ice. Ice hid rock. One wrong step would send him sliding into a ravine that would swallow his body and never spit it back out. Still, he climbed. Every breath burned. Every muscle screamed. He kept moving because stopping meant thinking. And thinking meant picturing the cabin. Picturing Lydia's face. Picturing children staring at the door, waiting for him. Then near midday, he heard it. Gunfire. 3 shots fast, distant, coming from behind him in the direction of the cabin. Elias froze so hard he felt his blood turn cold, his hands clenched into fists. For one terrible moment, every part of him wanted to turn back, to run downhill, to fight his way home, but he forced himself to breathe and remember the only reason he was climbing. If he turned back now, Vent would win anyway. He kept going with shaking hands and a heart that felt like it might split in 2. As the sun sank, Elias crested the high pass and began the dangerous descent on the other side. By morning, he reached the valley road and spotted riders in the distance. He shouted until his throat tore. The lead rider stopped and turned. A man with a star pinned to his coat dismounted and watched Elias approach. Elias told him his name. He told him about Lydia Hale and the debt and the armed men. He told him about a cabin on a mountain holding a widow, 2 children, and a half-dead teacher. He told him about the shots he heard. The marshal's face stayed calm, but his eyes sharpened. He said the local law in Flat Ridge could be rotten. He said men like Vent often hid behind paper and threats. He said if Elias was lying, he would regret it. Elias said the marshal could arrest him later. Right now, they needed to ride. The marshal agreed. They turned their horses toward the mountain. Elias rode hard, praying he was not already too late. Elias rode like the mountain itself was chasing him. The marshal and his deputies kept pace, their horses blowing hard in the cold air, hooves striking frozen ground like hammer blows. Elias did not speak much. His mind stayed fixed on one thing, the cabin. Lydia, Noah, Emily, Walter. Every mile felt too slow. By late afternoon, they reached the lower slopes where snow returned in thicker bands and the trees stood closer together. Elias scanned for tracks and found them. Horse prints, several fresh enough to make his stomach tighten. The marshal noticed too and gave a short command to his men. They spread out quiet and ready. The cabin came into view through the timber dark against the white. Smoke rose from the chimney thin but steady. It looked whole, but Elias had learned the hard way that a place could look fine and still be full of death. Then he saw the door. Hay was barred from the outside again. Elias's chest locked up. He slid off the horse before it even stopped and ran through the snow. The marshal called after him to slow down, but Elias could not. He grabbed the heavy bar and pulled. It did not move. He slammed his shoulder into it once, twice, the wood biting into his bones. A deputy rushed in to help, and together they ripped it free. Elias kicked the door open and stormed inside. The cabin was alive. The fire burned. The air smelled of coffee and blood and smoke. Lydia stood near the stove, pale but standing, a revolver in her hand. Noah was at the window with the rifle, his face tight and focused like a grown man. Emily sat on the floor with Annabelle clutched against her chest, eyes wide but dry. Walter lay near the hearth, breathing shallow, his foot wrapped in bandages and tied to a chair. Furious and gagged was a man Elias had never seen before. Lydia's eyes met Elias's, and the strength in her face almost broke. She did not run to him. She just let out a slow breath, like she had been holding it for days. Noah's shoulders loosened a fraction. Emily stood and walked straight to Elias, as if the danger in the room did not matter anymore. "You came back," she said. "I promised," Elias answered, and his voice shook more than he wanted. The marshal stepped into the cabin behind him. His deputies followed, eyes moving, taking in every detail. The marshal's gaze landed on the bound man and then on Lydia. "Mrs. Hale?" he asked. Lydia nodded once. "Yes, sir." The marshal lifted his hat slightly. "Respectful Territorial Marshal Henry Webb. I'm here because a man nearly killed himself crossing a winter pass to tell me you were being hunted." Lydia's grip tightened on the revolver. Then she lowered it slowly. "Then he told you the truth." Noah spoke without turning from the window. "They came this morning." Elias's blood went cold. "How many?" "3, Noah said. 2 stayed in the trees. 1 came up close and lied. Said he was lost and freezing." Emily's voice came small but clear. "Mama said not to open the door." Lydia nodded, eyes still on the marshal like she did not trust the world yet. "I knew his face. I had seen him behind Vent before. He thought he could trick us." The marshal walked to the tied man and pulled the gag out. The man spat, then smiled like he owned the air. "You got no right to hold me," the man said. "This woman owes Mr. Vent. I'm here on legal business." The marshal's voice stayed calm. "What business?" "Debt collection," the man said. The marshal leaned closer. "And what did Mr. Balness Vance say she could do to pay off that debt?" The man hesitated, then sneered. "Whatever he wanted, it's lawful." The cabin went still. Lydia's face hardened like stone. Noah's hands tightened on the rifle. Elias felt something old and dark stir in his chest. The part of him that remembered war and what men did when they thought they could. The marshal's eyes went cold. "That is not lawful. That's a threat wearing a suit." The man's smile faded. "Vent owns this town. He owns the sheriff. He owns the judge." "Then he's been owning things he has no right to own," the marshal said. Elias stepped forward. "The shots I heard yesterday." Lydia's jaw tightened. Noah fired once. A warning shot into the snow. They backed off. "But I know they'll come again." The marshal nodded and turned to his deputies. "Take him." They untied the man and hauled him toward the door. He fought, cursed, and promised revenge. The marshal did not even look back. Outside, the deputies marched him into the trees. One stayed near the cabin with a rifle, watching the slope. Inside, the marshal set his attention on Lydia, gentle but firm. "Start from the beginning. Tell me everything. Dates, names, what he asked of you, what he threatened." Lydia told it all. Samuel's sickness, his death, the debt, Vince's demand, the escape, the men hunting her like she was not a person but a prize. Noah backed her up with details. A child should never have to know. Walter, weak but awake, added what he had seen in Flat Ridge over the years. How Vent twisted the law and used the sheriff as a weapon. When Lydia finished, the marshal sat back and let the silence settle. "This will not be settled with talk alone," he finally said. "But you have something Vent hates." "What's that?" Lydia asked. "A witness who won't bend," the marshal said, looking at Walter. "A boy who saw the men. A man who defended you and can testify," he added, looking at Elias. "And a doctor in town who already spoke to me. Vent can threaten one person. He cannot erase all of you." Lydia's eyes filled, but she did not let tears fall. "Will you stop him?" "I will try," the marshal said, "and I will do it the right way, not Vent's way." Elias's voice came rough. "And if Vent comes here first?" The marshal held his gaze. "Then he'll find out the Territos law reaches higher than his money." That night, the marshal left 2 deputies at the cabin and rode down toward Flat Ridge with the bound man, moving fast before Vent could hide his tracks. The cabin did not feel safe yet, but it felt guarded. That mattered. Elias sat by the fire, his rifle across his knees like before. But now Lydia sat near him instead of far away. Emily slept with Annabelle against her cheek. Noah kept his post until his eyes could not stay open anymore. Lydia finally spoke in a low voice. "When this is over, what will you do?" Elias stared into the flames. The old answer was easy. "Go back to being alone. Go back to silence. Go back to safety." But safety had never warmed a child's hands or kept a widow from being hunted. Safety had never looked like Noah standing tall at the window, ready to protect his mother. Safety had never looked like Emily, trusting a promise. "I don't know," Elias said honestly. Lydia nodded like she respected that more than any pretty lie. "Then maybe you don't have to decide tonight." The next morning, hoofbeats returned. Elias reached for his rifle, heart ready to break again. But it was the marshal. His face was grim, his eyes tired. "Vent is done," the marshal said. Lydia went still. "Done how?" "He tried to draw on me," the marshal said. "Or someone claims he did. The sheriff shot him." The marshal's mouth tightened. The town is already spinning stories. But Vince's papers are seized. His contracts, his threats, his dirty deals. The debt against you is burned away by the truth and ink. Lydia sank into the chair like her bones could not hold her anymore. Noah stared like he could not understand the world changing this fast. Emily blinked, then looked at her mother. "Does that mean we're safe?" she asked. The marshal's voice softened. "It means the law can't touch you. It means the bounty is over. It means you're free." The word hit the cabin like sunlight. Free. Lydia covered her face with one hand, and this time she did cry. Quiet and shaking. Not from weakness, but from everything she had carried finally dropping to the floor. Elias watched her and felt his own chest ache. He had spent 15 years thinking freedom meant being alone. Now he saw freedom could also mean being able to live without running. Over the next weeks, the snow melted enough to travel. Walter healed slowly, learning to walk again with a crutch. Lydia made plans. She talked about going north, starting fresh, finding land where Vince's name meant nothing. Elias packed, too. On the morning they left, Emily ran to him with a drawing. 5 stick figures in front of a cabin. Lydia, Noah, Emily, Walter, and Elias. "Our family," she said. Elias stared at it for a long moment, then folded it carefully and put it in his coat like it was something holy. He looked at Lydia. "I never had a wife," he said, voice low. "Never thought I would." Lydia held his gaze steady and brave. "You don't have to be alone anymore." Elias nodded once. Not a big moment, not fancy words, just a choice. They walked down the mountain together, leaving the cabin behind. The wind still moved through the pines, but it did not sound like a wounded thing anymore. It sounded like the world turning, making room for something new.